In the depths of a mysterious and dangerous jungle, the massive wreckage of a plane lies silently. Lisa steps into this desolate place, filled with shock and confusion. Inside the cabin, a woman's fate hangs in the balance, and this scene evokes a sense of déjà vu in Lisa. Just not long ago, she had watched a plane crash film with her husband, firmly believing it was merely a fabricated lie by the director to grab attention. Yet now, everything before her felt so real. When Lisa returned from the restroom, it was as if the entire world had been suddenly shrouded in darkness. The once lively cinema had turned empty and desolate, the flickering lights eerie and terrifying. Filled with panic, she hurried towards the exit, only to realize that outside had transformed into a primal forest, with plane wreckage scattered everywhere. Upon discovering survivors, she rushed to check on them without hesitation. However, fate had not finished its cruel joke. She soon found that all of this was merely a nightmare. But before she could fully awaken from this dream, a large hole was blown open in the cabin, and passengers along with flight attendants were instantly swept away by a terrifying gust of wind. The explosive firelight reddened her face, and violent turbulence threw her into the air. And buckled, Lisa collided back and forth in the cabin, narrowly escaping danger time and again, while the passengers behind her were not so fortunate. The plane disintegrated, its tail torn apart by the wind, the fuselage tilted, and Lisa slid back and forth, desperately trying to return to her seat. At the critical moment, her husband reached out to grab her, but a sudden, violent explosion mercilessly tore the plane apart between them. The wreckage Lisa was in plummeted rapidly, and the wind pinned her awkwardly against the plane. Seizing the opportunity, she searched for a seat to secure herself and finally managed to return to her seat. In the terrifying silence just seconds before the plane hit the ground, Lisa could only helplessly wait for death to arrive. Accompanied by a violent impact, she lost consciousness. When Lisa woke again, gasping for breath, she struggled to calm her emotions, only to realize that the film she had seen earlier was not just a dream. At that moment, a steel shard pierced through her calf, like a second stab from the Grim Reaper. She knew that if she didn't remove the shard, she would die here. Only by surviving could there be hope. Thus, she gritted her teeth against the excruciating pain, slowly pulled out the shard, tore off a piece of her skirt to bandage the wound, and shouted loudly for other survivors. But no one responded. Even the girl in the back row had perished. Gazing at the despairing primal forest before her, Lisa fell unconscious again. Time passed, and she was awakened by mosquito bites. With her strength slightly restored, she heard the distant sound of a rescue helicopter, igniting her will to survive. She struggled to tear off a scarf from a passenger in the back seat, stepped out of the plane wreckage, temporarily forgetting her pain, and strode toward an open area, waving her arms vigorously. A pilot noticed her, but his teammates believed that survival was impossible after a crash from 5 kilometers high, especially since she appeared so lively. Considering her a hallucination, helpless, Lisa had to return to the wreckage, only to find a tiger prowling nearby. Overwhelmed by fear, she instinctively stepped back, accidentally snapping a dry branch, which caught the tiger's attention. Just as the tiger was about to attack, the helicopter flew over again, its roaring sound scaring the tiger away. Lisa narrowly escaped death for the third time, collapsing to the ground, nearly breaking down. She picked up a cigarette to calm her nerves, only to find it had become soft from the water, so she picked up a teddy bear for comfort. In her despair, she thought of her husband. Using the survival knowledge he had taught her, she removed the teddy bear's pin, rubbed it on her clothes to create a magnetic compass, placed it on floating leaves to determine the eastern direction where her husband might be, and set off with hope. Thunder rumbled, signaling that heavy rain was coming. To avoid being obscured from rescue by the downpour, Lisa tightened her shoes, took water with her, and resolutely left the forest using a cane. But fate had not spared her. Just as she exited the forest, she fell into a swamp, the soft mud instantly swallowing half her body. She struggled desperately, luckily grabbing a nearby small tree, and with all her strength, managed to climb out. But this did not extinguish her determination to find her husband. She continued eastward, even as moss made her fall and roll. Her longing could not be stopped. Perhaps her persistence angered the Grim Reaper, and the missing tiger reappeared, relentlessly chasing her until it cornered her into a narrow space. After the tiger left, Lisa resumed her survival journey, finding a scattered suitcase along the way, inside of which a lighter still worked. As night fell, Lisa lit a campfire, smoked the cigarettes she had found, ate canned food, and enjoyed a moment of peace before falling asleep from exhaustion. The damp environment brought rain, and the campfire gradually extinguished. When dawn broke, the determined Lisa finally climbed to the mountaintop, where dense primal jungle and winding rivers lay before her. She quickly spotted the broken plane's nose, where her husband might be, praying earnestly that he was still alive. She hurried down to the riverbank but underestimated the swift currents of the Siberian River. The hidden undercurrent flipped her over, and being unable to swim, she choked on several mouthfuls of water, her hands flailing in panic until a large rock blocked her, allowing her to crawl to the opposite bank. The plane's nose was within reach. After a brief rest, she began her search, but unfortunately, her husband was not there. However, she was lucky enough to find a flare gun and 2 bullets. With hope in her heart, she fired one into the sky, but no one responded, as the search had been suspended. And willing to accept this, she fired the second shot, only to realize that no one could see it now. The bone-chilling cold continuously eroded her will. When she planned to start a fire for warmth, she discovered that the lighter had been damaged by water. She could only put a plastic bag over her head to slow down the loss of body heat. Just as Lisa was about to despair, she spotted her husband's backpack above her. She took it down and rummaged through it, finding a sketchbook filled with memories of their beautiful moments, which revived her spirit. Realizing her husband might be nearby, she braved the heavy rain to search the area. Her efforts were rewarded when she found her husband's figure in a large pit. She joyfully leapt into his arms, and he comforted her as they embraced tightly, exchanging sweet words. The warm atmosphere enveloped Lisa, and she fell asleep in her husband's embrace. The rain woke her, and she realized that all of this had merely been her fantasy. Her husband had long passed away in the crash. Heartbroken, she looked in her husband's direction and strengthened her resolve to live on. Only by surviving could she bring her husband home. With all her strength, she climbed out of the pit, picked up the flare gun, and fired the last signal shot. The rescue team followed the sound and finally rescued Lisa. As the plane slowly started up, Lisa strained to lift her body, taking one last look at the place that had left an indelible mark on her. In a daze, she seemed to see her husband smiling and waving at her, as if bidding farewell or rejoicing at her rescue. The film comes to a close. This film, Crash of Terror, released in 2022, is based on true events. On August 24, 1981, over Zavyakinsk, Soviet Union, a passenger plane collided with a Tu-160 bomber, crashing from an altitude of 5 kilometers. Over 30 people on board perished, with only one survivor. The film concludes with footage of the real-life protagonist, Larisa Savitskaya, being interviewed. She had just married her husband and was on what was supposed to be a sweet honeymoon trip when tragedy struck, separating them forever. Savitskaya was undoubtedly lucky, being the sole survivor of all plane crashes, but she was also deeply unfortunate, losing everything, including her beloved. In the aftermath, she received only 75 rubles in compensation, earning her a spot in the Guinness World Records for the least compensation for a plane accident. Whether this is a mockery of the airline or a peculiar encouragement for her remains unknown. But it constantly reminds us that tomorrow and accidents are unpredictable. We should not take for granted the days ahead and overlook the unpredictability of life. Perhaps a casual goodbye could mean a final farewell. Therefore, cherish those around you.